What's going on, everyone? We are at ETH Denver. We're not in the castle right now because it's a 2 hour line, so we relocated to my hotel room. But we're excited to come to you live from Denver with the first of our series on developer focused webinars with none other than our VP of Engineering and someone that's been with me at Messari for the full 4 years so far, Diran Lee. We're going to talk a little bit about Diran's background, obviously, because if you look at the Twitter stats, which are completely meaningless, then you are the unsung hero of Messari because I think obviously your public presence so far has been few and far between. We're working to change that this year given how big the team is and how much has been built that I think people don't really understand at Messari. But we also want to make this more than just like an overt promotion because you already know that I'm going to hype up Messari. But we do have a lot of developers that are at ETH Denver right now. Some of them might see this while they're waiting in line, wink, wink. And hopefully this can help for folks that are thinking about the transition maybe from Web 2 to Web 3 or just thinking about different opportunities and problems to solve within Web 3. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, and this is actually the first of 4 episodes that we're going to do over the course of the next 2 days. We have Craig, who's our lead front-end engineer. He's going to be joining us at 3 p.m. for an episode right after this. And then we have Vincent and Malcolm from our engineering team as well. They're going to be talking a little bit more in the weeds on the Web3 side with on-chain data, how that's parsed, how that's processed, and how you can manipulate it for applications. And then a little bit in terms of DAOs and on-chain governance with Malcolm. So we got a full slate here. But Diran, let's start out with the basics. You're new to a lot of people. I think a lot of people are sick of seeing me. So this is like a new face at Messari that I think many people might be surprised to learn that you've been, part of the founding team and really with us for 4 years. So do you want to just kind of walk through your background and like the decision point to go kind of full into crypto and what the journey was? And we can kind of jump off from there in terms of, what the different opportunities are within crypto for someone that's coming from Web 2.
Yeah, I think a lot of developers are probably in a similar boat where it's much easier and it's almost the preferred state of just building in a siloed box and shield it from the outside world. And that's very much where I came from. So I came from more of a traditional tech background, started my career at Microsoft and did a couple years at Palantir, both in building data analytical platforms, so ingesting a lot of very sparse data, making sense of the scale of the data, but also trying to pull out the signal out of it. For me, I started getting an itch around this in 2014, where I started going to a couple of meetups in the Bay Area, and that was when Bitcoin was still fairly early. Ethereum was pre-alpha. People started talking about building this internet computer that is decentralized, that Vitalik was talking about stuff like you can decentralize Dropbox super easily. And to be frank, I didn't quite believe it at the time. I thought this was super cool and the vision was great, but I kind of just tossed it aside for a couple years.
Magnify that pain by someone that was full-time in Bitcoin and had the same reaction.
Yes. Yeah. So we probably went through the similar pain here. And then 2016 happened, the DAO hack. And I was like, this thing is huge. It got hacked for, $50 million at the time. And the thing that I didn't quite understand and quite believe in had this amount of value accrued to it. So maybe there's something to it. So 2017, I spent all my nights and weekends building in Web3, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I just reached out to a number of folks that I kind of knew a little bit from their online presence, just offered my services, and to be frank, I made a couple offers that people couldn't refuse, which was, hey, I'm an engineer from Palantir, and I'm going to work for free on whatever you want me to work on. And it was very hard for people to say no to that. Yeah. And it was sort of my secret backdoor into this industry, where very much lots of hype at the time, 2017, ICO boom. And
not so secret backdoor because you skipped over Waterloo math.
Sure.
to big tech, to Palantir, and then into Web3. So
Yeah.
kind of a cheat code, but especially if you're working for free.
Exactly, exactly. If you work hard and have a decent pedigree, then there's definitely opportunities out there. Even today, I think the same methodology applies. And for Web3 crypto, at the time, I just didn't know who to trust. So there's just so many white papers that were being launched, and so many people raising a lot of money that felt like just vaporware. So to me, as a builder in this space, I wanted to have some data source that I could trust, and something that I could build on top of it. And it was very hard to find at the time. I think outside of just the surface layer of, hey, which coin is traded at what, it's very hard to know which coin to believe in, and more importantly, what are the roadmaps, what are the stuff that they're shipping. And I think some of those problems are active today as well. So fast forward, that's basically what led me to Messari, of when we started talking about the vision of bringing transparency to this space, but also having a deep focus around data integrity. We're going to ingest a lot of data, but we're also going to make sense of it such that we're not outputting the fire hose to our end user, and we're being transparent with our methodologies, such that if you want to, you can reapply yourself and come up with the same result, but it allows the developer at least a foundation to build upon. And hopefully we're aiming for a foundation of trust, of how you can trust that this data came from a valid source, and also that we've done the curation job on top of it.
So I think that's a good kind of meta pitch for Messari, and I'm sure we'll get back to that just with the other conversations that we have and different verticals that we're talking about. But let's pull back a little bit. Data made sense to you because you were coming from big data with Palantir. But there's also, I think, an element of, do you go the crazy exotic route of building in a tokenized world, in a token protocol, or do you kind of actually go into an infrastructure provider and kind of build foundational tools that are ultimately going to be relevant and kind of satisfy this new economy, which is going to come with different technical challenges. In some respects, that might be an easier bridge for some developers. Certainly was back then, right? To your point, a lot of these were kind of vaporware, and you weren't sure who was actually building legitimate open protocols. Now it seems a little bit more credible to go to a protocol environment. But how, if you were kind of starting today, making that transition from Palantir, or just kind of big tech in general, how do you think you would think about the split between infrastructure, not just data infrastructure, but infrastructure and like a token project?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies have done really well in this space by bridging the world from Web 2 to Web 3. I think going to the two extreme, on one end, you sort of need to come up with a token economics, the game theory aspect of it. And a lot of it is trial by error, but like Andre would say, test on prod. And that has a lot of high risk to it. But it also bears a lot of high risk to the end consumer, who is consuming a product that is less mature. But I think there's a lot of ways that people can contribute from the Web 2 to Web 3 world. And I think a lot of our friends have done quite well as well in that regard, with Alchemy, with Dune, of how do you make sense of this world? Either by interacting with this space, interacting with nodes, or interacting through research of getting some insight out of it. So the areas that I would parallel to this is data is not going away. The main difference between the Web 2 and Web 3 world is Web 3 world data is open, whereas Web 2 data for a lot of part is closed. So you can have data analysis on financial systems that otherwise are not privy to you. So that's the first foundation of it. There's obviously a lot of stuff on top of it that people are speaking to these days about decentralized social media, so on and so forth. But it bears no question that we're going to be facing with a lot of data. And how do you make sense of that data is crucial. And for that reason, the skills from Web 2 is very much transferable. The data analytical platforms that you build, the ETL pipelines of how do you transform that data, how do you aggregate that data, and how do you present that data such that the user can make sense of it in an analytical platform, but also from a interaction perspective, how do I interact with nodes in a resilient way such that things just don't fall underneath me. That bears a lot of similarities with traditional computer science and traditional server management and services management.
So that's again, I think a lot of the data side, but it's more broad in terms of building tools and infrastructure that can bridge Web 2 and Web 3. So obviously for this conversation, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Messari stack just to put this in frame of reference and give people that kind of firsthand experience and understanding of how we're building. But I think you can also look at some of the answers to this next part of the conversation as starting points for some of the other services you might use or some of the other tools that we've explored when we're building ourselves. And maybe, Diran, what we can do is we can go down at least the three buckets that we're going to talk about in subsequent conversations with Craig, Vincent, and Malcolm. But basically, you talked about our pipeline and our entire system. There's essentially, I'd say, 6 kind of core components, right? There's the front end, like data visualization and analytics tools. There's the market data infrastructure, which is its own beast because that's the one metric that everybody needs to get right in this highly liquid world. There's all the on-chain analytics and integrations, and that could be supporting developers, or it could be supporting the data that an investor is using, right? And we're obviously on one end of the spectrum, but some of the folks that are building today might build on some of the tools that we're going to talk about in that segment. Then there's the governor world, which is kind of this mix of all the qualitative and chain information that you would get for how these on-chain entities are actually managed, and that's I think an exciting emerging environment that a lot of folks are going to be building in this weekend and in general in the coming year. And then you have kind of the API infrastructure and kind of miscellaneous like alerts and I think most of that might be centered around an API, but there's other kind of miscellaneous spokes that go into it where you're just trying to normalize the ingestion of different types of data and spit it out in like a clean UI, whether that's through an API or that's through a front end like some of the tools that we have at Messari. So we're not going to go through market data as we discussed because unfortunately Adam is sick, so we'll do that in a subsequent conversation. But I think it's just as well because the folks who might be hacking this weekend will probably be really excited about, I'd imagine, DAOs, on-chain infrastructure, and then maybe some front-end tools just to make sense of all these new different sectors of crypto, right? Like how do you visualize and understand NFTs or DAOs or every single week it seems like there's another set of applications that are just underserved on the front end. We're working on some of those, satisfying some of those, but it's a never-ending challenge to just keep up with everything as it's evolving. So why don't we go starting? I mean, we could start any direction. I mean, is that a good frame of reference and like starting point? Or do you want to talk about some just kind of core building blocks of building a system like this, or do you want to start with one of those 3 buckets?
Maybe we can just seed a couple seeds in the various buckets, and especially since we're at ETH Denver, give folks a little bit of a hint around the type of stuff that they might be hacking on. So first, around the user experience side of things, it's fair to say that the user experience is still very lackluster in this space compared to Web 2, where people are super accustomed to just like very pretty walled garden. It's very far from that. So for the hackers out there, signing in with Ethereum is becoming more and more popular these days, and it ties into the concept of if I have a wallet, can I just sign in to your application right away? I connect my wallet, done, and I get a personalized experience off of that. So personalizing based off of maybe the asset that I own, but also maybe from the actions that I perform inside of the platform. So signing in with Ethereum, I think, unlocks a lot, but also takes a step away from the Web 2 world, where you're sort of beholden to like a Google or Facebook, where you're giving in your signing information to them. So one bucket there, seeding. Two, on-chain interaction, on-chain analytics. There's a couple ways that we can go from there. There's a lot of protocols that have come up that are very interesting these days. Tying into the user experience and just doing a transition here, performance is another big one.
Mm-hmm.
So we won't be able to have a seamless experience unless we have a really performant blockchain. So what's really exciting these days is a lot of these layer 2 ecosystem are springing up, and that ties into the DeFi metrics that we'll be talking about with Vincent. That ties into the DAOs, the NFTs, how do we store all of that data. So layer 2 performance, but also the sidechains, super interesting these days. And obviously there's the two different school of thoughts that are at play here that are very interesting, with the validity proofs and the fraudulent proofs. So optimistic rollup versus ZK rollup. We can dive into a little bit of details into for the audience. So that's the second big bucket that I would say. And then the third one is just going into the fringes and making sense of this world. You mentioned DAO, you mentioned NFTs. It's very hot these days, but people don't know what is actually a DAO. How does a DAO function? Who's in control of that DAO? And that ties into NFTs as well, where a lot of NFTs are being issued, and who's issuing them? How does the royalties work? Why is that a better model than the traditional Web2 world? I think there's a lot of exploration to be had there, and we're still super early.
Well, we have a couple things that we might tease tomorrow in person, at least, with the developers that come and interact with us on the NFT and DAO side. We have a fun thing that we can't actually name on camera right now because of our legal. Thank you, Gary Gensler. But we are being very thoughtful about some of the experiments that we have, and encourage you, if you're around, come and flag one of us down, and we'll tell you a little bit more about it. So I think that's a terrific framing. And before we get into our elements of the stack, you brought up single sign-on, essentially, with like connecting your wallet. Maybe we should take a pause and what is the do this, do not do that, for just like general security at a hackathon like this, where you're going to be encouraged to experiment, but you could be experimenting with, live wallets and your systems that we've seen, personally, and I know, many others have had exploits from, potentially just linking to bad sites or not really understanding all of the pitfalls for this Web3 single sign-on world that isn't gated by something like the App Store.
Yeah, security is absolutely the Achilles heel for this space. It's sort of the double-edged sword of being your own bank. Yes, I do own all of my financials, but all of my financials are at risk here. So taking a step back, just overviewing 5 minutes around cryptography security. How does this work? So people might be talking, you might have heard people talk about wallets, accounts, private keys, public keys, seed phrases. What do all of these terms mean? And as a new builder in this space, what should you do? So first thing first, the most important thing in all of these keywords is seed phrase. So all of the wallets, all of the accounts in Web3 are tied to some sort of seed that generates these accounts. So it's made as a primitive to for us humans to remember, hey, if I lose my wallet, if my computer goes to the dumpster,
if you slip and swear, by the way, it's going to be okay.
Okay.
This is something that I'm hosting, which
all
you
right,
know. So
all right.
Yeah, it's probably going to have a PG-13 rating at least.
All right. So the seed phrase is really used to recover everything from your wallet. That's why it's so freaking important.
Mm-hmm.
So the seed phrase, some people might mistake it to tie to a specific account within your wallet,
Mm-hmm.
but that misnomer is not true. It is tied to every single account, such that if you take that seed phrase and you input it to a whole different wallet, so let's say I have my MetaMask on one computer, I take my seed phrase, I input it into a brand new computer, I can regenerate every single account from that seed phrase. That's why it's so super important to keep the seed phrase private and never reveal it to one of the million sites out there that are scamming people and are asking people, hey, you need to input your seed phrase in order to unlock this, in order to go to this secret room, or in order to get a windfall of money. So this is the most important thing. The next important thing is private keys. So private keys are tied to a specific account, and that is used to generate the account address. If that private key is compromised, only that specific account is compromised. So wrapping a bow around this for the hackers out there that want to experiment this week, our recommendation is just take a brand new MetaMask with a brand new seed phrase that you only are going to experiment with that one. Everything else, just store it away. You don't need it this week. Take something brand new, start from scratch, and it's a hack week. So start from a blank slate.
All right, so that's, I think, a good number one. Signing with your wallet, though, right? So you're much less exposed if you sign with a new wallet with a fresh seed phrase this weekend. So I think that's the right starting point. In general, though, right? Not everybody's going to listen because they're going to want to actually experiment with live money, or they're going to want to be able to, deploy things to mainnet. So they may have a less than ideal kind of starting point from a security setup. How do you discern between legitimate websites that you would feel comfortable signing in with your wallet and connecting and like actually signing that transaction, versus steering clear and just kind of avoiding that at all costs? Is there a registry? Is there kind of a set of pattern that you look for just to understand whether it's a malicious link, and whether what you're actually signing could be compromising your account?
Yeah. So first thing first, if you're gonna play around with money, take a wallet that has very little amount of money, such that if you lose it, it's money it's house money. You can play around with. As far as the telltale signs of a website, first, if it's something that people are trying to get you to do something from a Telegram group or from a Discord group, those have been super popular these days. Of, hey, I'm trying to do something, a random stranger pops in, they might have just only messaged this once and post a random link to you. If you go there, it's fine. But if you sign in, first look out, are they looking for a seed phrase? So that's another red flag here. A third red flag is whether it has HTTPS on the site or not. Generally, hackers are becoming better and better at covering their bases, but a lot of them are being super lazy. And then lastly, if you do sign on, there are a couple layers in terms of protocols to be aware of. Signing with Ethereum generally has been mature enough such that if you just sign in and you're just signing in with a private key that signs your signature, it's fine. Some of the newer protocols you might want to be more cautious about, especially if it's a wallet that is in alpha or beta. The general thinking around this is you kind of want to let like the Lindy effect build up, where, hey, if this wallet hasn't been hacked for the last 6 months or so, then you get more trustworthiness. If it hasn't been hacked for a year, then you get more trustworthiness. So the longer that it's been around, the longer that the chain has been around, the more security that you can feel in signing in with that wallet.
Last one, because Coinbase advertised during the Super Bowl. It was a little bit controversial in terms of using a QR code for that commercial. It's like, I saw some people on Twitter. I thought it was a brilliant ad, but some people on Twitter were like, "This is terrible, OPSEC. This is bad habits." I think that's probably overdone because most people that were using a QR code were probably just doing it, on a whim, not necessarily connecting, accounts with real, financial assets to them. But how do you think about things like that? Because a lot of people, are getting used to signing with QR codes. Obviously, that's integral to a lot of crypto experiences, and I'm sure we're going to see some QR codes floating around the next couple of days.
Yeah, I actually think there's probably a little bit of a misnomer here between QR code, what it is, and signing in. QR code, generally speaking, is just a compressed set of information. So I could give you the full website. I could just literally just write it down. But for any Super Bowl viewer to type in every single key, that's not feasible. So what a QR code really just translates to is just a website. So the OPSECs on a specific website still applies. So when you do go to that link, the things to watch out for are they trying to scam me? Are they trying to make me sign in with a wallet that is unproven? Am I using a lot of funds and applying this to that website? So to me, I much think of security from the destination perspective as opposed to the origin medium.
Got it. All right, so you got 3 good ones. Don't use your seed phrase. Make sure that you follow good practices from just single sign-on and connecting your wallets. And don't be afraid to use a QR code for the buffercoins, but be careful what you're signing, as we talked about in 1 and 2.
Exactly, and use minimal funds.
So I actually don't know which competitions there are this weekend or what people are most excited to hack away at, but maybe we can talk about the data tools that we've built, very brief, and kind of how we've architected them, between the screener, charting, and kind of thinking about these time series data sets. And then give people a little flavor of like the infrastructure that we've used or the third parties that we've used, because that might give people ideas for kind of quick and dirty APIs that they could connect to, or other third party services that could be building blocks for their applications if they're going to go with a data application this weekend, for instance.
Yep.
So let's start there, and then we'll go through those 3 buckets.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be using time related data, whether that's trades on Uniswap, for example, or lending protocols. Everything has a timestamp. And for us, we went through a number of iterations of finding the right time series database. So what we use is we use Timescale. So Timescale DB, they're a good friend of ours. They're also in like a hungry mode, startup mode. So we very much relate to that. So that is our foundation database. On top of that, we build what we call an aggregation service, or the start of an aggregation layer, which is what you alluded to with our API. So when someone requests sometimes series data, whether that's trades on Uniswap or another DEX, we transform that into, hey, what granularity do you want that data on? Is it 5 minutes? Is it an hour? Is it 1 minute? We also transform it to, hey, maybe you want some aggregation of data. Maybe you want the price times the supply to get market cap. So that is our abstraction layer, the API, and I think a lot of people are going to be facing something like that as well. For us, we use Golang in terms of speediness of our services. On top of that, building visualization, that's another challenge. User experience is huge in this space, and making sense of good data, but also making sense of a lot of data is a big challenge, and we'll talk a lot more with Craig on this. But for that, we use a combination of things. We surface our data through GraphQL. So GraphQL combines a lot of our data into an easy queryable backend for front end, such that the front end can choose which type of query and choose if I'm building a module for DEX, versus I'm building a module for a landing protocol. I can just get the data that I need to display. And the last piece is displaying. So choosing the right technology to showcase this. So we use Trading Views library for this, quick and easy charting tool, and we'll chat more with Craig on that.
Real quickly, and I'll maybe present the same question to Craig for the second episode here. You got 48 hours to hack. There's a lot of meat on the bone for our systems, obviously, because it's a business process and there's a different level of quality and reliability that people need. But if you were just to hack away at one data tool, if we did an internal hackathon or you're able to get a little free time this weekend, what would be the thing that you'd be most excited about that doesn't exist in the market right now that could be like an easy win for a developer?
Yeah, I think making sense of we hinted about this, but there's just so many DAOs out there, but it's very hard to make sense of what DAO is doing, how much money they're operating with, who's working on those DAOs. That's probably something that I would hack on.
All right, so if you're gonna hack away at that this weekend, we'll come find you, and maybe there's something more than just a 48-hour stretch here over the weekend. All right, so let's talk about number 2, the on-chain infrastructure, and we'll do a preview of this because we'll have a deeper conversation with Vincent. But I think a lot of people are going to be building on either Alchemy or the graph subgraphs or a variety of the services that we use. Just walk through the pros and cons of building on some of the middleware that's out there versus like going directly and connecting to the chain, and just how you think about making those decisions depending on what type of application you're building.
Yeah, I think for especially a hack week, the easiness of getting data is key here. So I don't want to have to understand a specific protocol. We've done that time and time again. And it takes a couple of days just to understand what the hell the protocol is doing. So for us, retrieving that data in a nicely formatted domain model is key here. So we've done a lot of work in creating a consistent domain model inside of the Messari world. You can think of the graph as creating that for individual subgraphs. Now, there's a caveat here is because you have different creators and different contributors to subgraphs, they don't come in the same level of quality. So they come in different shapes and forms, and sometimes you have ones that are really good, that are in production, that, for example, the Uniswap one is very good. And the Uniswap team works on it, and they rely on it from their front end. But there are many other ones that people are just have created as a weekend toy project, and it's less reliable. And for those cases, I would go directly on chain. So if you can't get it the easy way, go the harder way. So go on chain, interact with something like Alchemy if you're using Ethereum, and grab the data from the protocol itself. Now, there's 2 tools that have been super helpful for us. One is Etherscan. Everyone knows Etherscan. It's been it's become better and better with the standards that they've created, where people post their code onto Etherscan. You can read the code, you can decipher, you can also interact with the specific smart contracts. So if you don't want to write code to interact with it, you can just point and click on Etherscan. And then a tool that's been very slept upon is Tenderly. So Tenderly is a great tool where you can go in and you can kind of be an investigator, where you have a great UI, you see what's happening in each of the transactions, and you can dive into a specific piece of code that has triggered a transaction or out of it. And you can read a lot of smart contract code. They make it super easy. And it really feels like a tool built for developers as opposed to just exploring some blockchain. So Tenderly, I think it's a great tool, and it's very much slept upon.
Do you think there is maybe not in a long weekend, or maybe, do you think that there would be the ability for any team to actually create a scoring system or some like automated check or reputation system for subgraph quality? Or, is that just something that has to be done through trial and error and just like humans looking at the code? How do you think about that? And how do you navigate all those subgraphs? Because that infrastructure does power hundreds, if not thousands, of open protocols now in terms of how people access them on chain.
Yeah, I almost think of subgraphs as needing some sort of garbage collectors. So
Mhm.
it's a term that is very familiar in the computer science world,
Mhm.
but the graveyard is so big in this subgraph world, and a lot of subgraphs, when you go to it, it's very clear. Like nothing is being indexed. There are no indexers, there are no curators, there's no signal, and there's no data. So all of those are throwaways, and
Mhm.
I wish someone can just garbage collect all of those. So
What's that hacker command? Room FD or
yes, RM-RF.
RMRF? Yes. So if you want to create an RMRF for a test GitHub for all the subgraphs that are not well maintained, that could be a good application.
Yeah.
What any other ideas for a really killer like quick turn application that someone might be able to hack away in a weekend on the on-chain infrastructure data side?
On-chain infrastructure, I think so it might be enough time to build a subgraph yourself. So if it's something that you're already tinkering around with, let's say you're super into Balancer or Aave, and you want to build a subgraph on top of it in order to display the visualization that you want for lending protocols, then I think that's fairly feasible if you're already familiar with those protocols.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's also a very good experience as an engineer to have to understand how this end-to-end system works.
Yep. All right. Last but not least, DAOs. Not only do we have kind of the 1.0 DAOs experimenting with governance like Uniswap and Compound, the DeFi DAOs that are now giving their token holders the ability to vote based on some snapshot of when they held the assets. But you also have this emerging world of like NFT related DAOs. I know it's early, and even we're just starting to experiment with some of these things. But how have you thought about the initial R&D phase as we unveiled the Governor product, and as we've kind of thought about just to your point on visualization tools, like just figuring out what's going on and how you can actually track all of the activity in some of these more bottoms up communities that are starting to rally around DAOs.
Yeah, this is a skill that I think Web 2 companies do very well, which is, and only certain Web 2 companies. And by that, I mean, it's very dispersed data in the DAO world right now. You kind of don't know where to retrieve the data. So if there's a proposal that is happening, you don't know whether it's being talked about deep inside of some forums, some Discord, some Telegram channel, or on Snapshot, or does it make it on chain? So aggregating that data is very important. So there's some parallels to Web 2, but then making sense of that data. So once you have that data, you need some sort of human interaction to curate that information. And this is where we've come to is that human-computer symbiotic relationship is so key here. But it's also something that you can only do if you have a very strong research team that are deep into this weed, in the weed of the space, and are following covering nearly everything, and a strong technical team that are able to aggregate all of these dispersed sort of information with a lot of noise and combine them together into a uniform experience for the end user. So in terms of DAOs, the way that we've approached it is just first getting the data has been very hard. So how do you understanding each of these protocols? What are they doing on chain? What are they doing off chain? In that sense, Snapshot is a good one to hack on this week. they have great API. There's a lot of activity there, and it's also penniless. So you can interact with Snapshot pretty much for free by voting or delegating on it. So Snapshot is one, but aggregating the data, making sense of the data with the research team, and then displaying on the UI. We also want a UI that is both broad in depth and in depth, in the sense that I want to give you a sense of the high priority proposals, the high priority changes in the various DAOs that are happening. Which DAO is going through like a big ass change, and if you go into it, want to give the user a chance to participate in it. So you sort of go from a 10,000 foot view into a very specialized visualization on, hey, who's voting on what, how many votes have happened, either off chain, on chain, and how people are talking about it in these discussion forums.
Well, I think we may have some questions. No? Well, we're going to have some questions on site, I'm sure. So we will we'll see everybody on site. Oh, I think we have one more right at the very end. One comment: there need to be a better way to keep seed phrases safe. Keeping it on a device leaves you open, and writing it down and putting it somewhere safe is very outdated. I agree. So
Yes.
if you're going to hack away at that and you come up with a solution, you let us know. But I would say in general to everybody watching, stay tuned. We're going to be doing this much more frequently. We're doing a little bit of a shock and awe early set of sessions with Diran and our other engineers on this developer crowdcast, developer-centric crowdcast. We can't call it a developer crowdcast because I'm interviewing, at least initially. So eventually, hopefully, it graduates to that. But stay tuned, subscribe here for updates, and we're going to come right back in about 20 minutes, 15 minutes with an interview with Craig, our lead front-end engineer. He's going to be talking about more of our visualization tools and the front-end that's used. And then we will see you all around the castle if you're here on site. Otherwise, make sure you hit us up on Twitter. Diran, what's your Twitter handle?
At Diran_Lee.
DIRAN_Lee, L-I. So I will make sure to tag him in subsequent tweets here. Get ready for your barrage of followers. So until 15 minutes from now, thank you for tuning in.